Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I don't know who likes horror stories. Anyone? Do you have some time on your day jobs? So today I want to share a bit of a story that we got with one client, that the things went terrible wrong, and why it happened, and how you should do to try to avoid it, okay? My name is Claudio Silva, my pronouns are him, and I'm a data platform architect, and on my daily job, the things that I do is performance tuning, the most, and also using PowerShell to automate the stuff, because I'm very lazy. I'm an open source contributor for DBA tools and DBA checks. If you have any questions regarding those, I'm happy to answer too, okay? So, and also, you have here my contacts if you want to connect. The story. We have business system, a busy system running 24/7. Who runs systems like this here? Anyone? You have? Go. I think those are the greatest, because you have all the real problems, all the stress situations that you need to kind of act fast and know where you need to look at and touch. So now imagine on this system that someone deployed an index, because until go to production, everything was perfect. It was tested on with the correct workload. Things will go faster with this index. But all of a sudden, the system was slower than before. This is a real picture of that system. So here you can see where the problem appeared. So CPU went to the roof, and you can also see that some metrics at some point were not being able to be collected, and the wait stats on the system went also to the roof. So the question is, what happened? Any idea what you think it happened here? So this is the original script that the deployment team run. Okay? So we are dropping the current index, creating the index with the same name, but instead of one column, adding an extra index key. So, and also important, it was doing with offline, meaning that the table being used will lock to be able to create the index. So, before we go further, a couple of disclaimers. What we are talking here just is based for the role-based index, okay? So do not cover column store index, XML, spatial, and the full text index. I'm only talking about standard / enterprise features. So, of course, if you work with development, you have the same as you have enterprise. If you don't need them because the system is not that critical, or you can have proper downtime, offline time, that is great for you. I don't know where is the fun of that, but that is okay. And we also will see a kind of what is good about these options and what you need to keep in mind. So don't take them as, oh, this is the pro and cons comparison, okay? But rather, these are the pros, and this is the things that I still need to keep in mind to be able to do a good job. So first of all, first disclaimer, there are more than 15 different options, okay, to deploy when you want to deploy an index, and depending on the version, edition, and so on. Also, as I said before, it's standard enterprise, but it's also based on 2019 or 2022 versions, sorry. Meaning that if you go back in previous versions, you may not encounter these options there. And I will kind of make the notes, but the feature that we are talking, or the option, may or not be an enterprise feature. So let's start with the one that, that in this case could somehow help on the other side. So if you are changing an existing index, the thing is, using the drop existing, it will make possible to do it in a single statement instead of doing first drop and then the creation, okay? And that will become a single transaction, meaning that if by some reason I said, let's stop this because I'm blocking the system or something like that, it will roll back almost immediately. And if everything goes as we expect, the previous index is only dropped after this one is finished to be created. So we have like a side transaction running. Whenever these ones finish, everything is good, let's drop the old one. If while this is running, we say, kill it, stop it, this will be almost instantaneous to stop, and this one still there working. That was what didn't work for that client, because the drop went successful, and then the creates start running, they start having the issue, and whenever they say, well, let's stop it, the index was not already there anymore. So the index was okay-ish to run the things they were running. The newer version will be faster, yes, but if you drop and before, or you drop in one transaction and you do the creation on the other, you can get these effects. So a thing to keep in mind in this case, for the drop existing, it's only possible if you keep the same index name. So if you think about changing the index name because your name is kind of based on the column/table that you are using, my other suggestion will be, if you can afford, create the index side by side and then drop the previous one. Okay, so create the new one with the new name. But if you can keep the same name, drop existing, in my opinion, should be always present to avoid these situations about dropping first and creating after. Next, data compression. Who uses data compression when creating index? Okay, so this is something that exists. And sorry, by the way, the previous one exists on standard and enterprise. Okay, so you can get the leverage on any of those. The data compression is also something to keep in mind, because whenever we compress the data, what we are saying is that we can fit more data in the same page, right? Meaning that in the end, we have less page to get all the data that we need. And that will have impact not only on the disk, because the data will be compressed there, but also when the SQL Server picks the page from the disk and put in memory, they remain in memory compressed. So your buffer cache will also, the buffer pool, sorry, will also leverage on this, because you can keep the same data with less space occupied, which can also translate to queries become faster, because if to read the data I need to read 1,000 page, and now I just need to read 10 because the compression had a good ratio, and therefore I have much less page to read, that will become much faster. Also, be aware, if you use partitioning, this can be applied per partition. Why I like to do this disclaimer, because, or these notes, if you are running processes that are appending data to the end of the table, and the table is already partitioned, maybe you want to compress previous partitions, but keep the current one not compressed, because the compression can have CPU overhead, okay? And if you have a highly transactional system that is doing this, you need to test and to measure if you see any bottleneck or any problem or any CPU going up because of that. Also, check the system store procedure that you can pass a couple of parameters, and it will give you estimation of how much you can compress or not with that. Next one, enterprise only, online on. So, do you prefer taking a bit longer, but the system is online, or do you prefer to be completely offline? Depends on your needs. So, there are no free lunch, but there is a balance. If it is 10 a.m. in the morning and I need to deploy an index by some reason, and I can deploy it with online on and keep my system running while the index is being deployed, I don't care if it will take 1 hour to deploy that index, because I rather wait 1 hour for that index than 10 minutes with my table completed lock and my system down. So think about that whenever you think about deploying the index, because the online on, you can still access the table. So what happens in the beginning, the engine acquires a schema modification lock on the table, and then it can continue using, and in the end do the same to do like the differential. The thing I said is slower than the online, okay? You also need extra disk space because the transaction log can grow more in this situation. And there is a couple of limitations that some types, column types that you cannot use with, okay? Okay, max DOP, max degree of parallelism. So it's an option that will restrict the number of processors that can be used on the parallel index operation, okay? So we have these set as an instance level. You can also set it as a database level, and you can set it on your query level, okay? And in this case, when you create or rebuild or whatever index, you can set a different number because maybe you are doing in a time of the day that you want to leverage on more cores and to be a little bit faster. So 0 is the default, and the maximum is 64. Now, the option for me seems to be like a huge game changer when working with creation of the index. So it appears in 2019, and you can use an option called resumable on. So this option, imagine that you have a lot of activity on the system, you start creating an index, that activity increases, and you say, well, I need to abort the creation of the index because I'm creating some trouble, and I'm also consuming the CPU and so on. If you trigger the creation of the index with this option, you can pause the creation of the index. Pause. Meaning that 2 hours after, my workload is already a little bit down, and I can say, let's resume. And it will continue from it was before. So if you have done like 10%, it will go from that point on. Of course, if you had a lot of data on that table being inserted, maybe the 10% now is 9 or 8, but that will continue from where it was. And because the way it works, which is creating a structure side by side with the existing one, the thing that is real awesome, so whoever went in a situation where transaction log went full because you were having a huge transaction running, okay? Or you were creating an index, and all of a sudden you have that transaction open that will not make able the backup to clear the transaction log. So this thing allows log truncation. So this, for me, is like a game change, because if your system, you have backups every 15 minutes, for instance, if the index takes 1 hour to run, every 15 minutes you are getting rid of that portion of the log and make the system continue running for the other things. It can be paused up to 7 days, although the default configuration is 1 day, okay? So if it's a scoped configuration on the database, is 1 day. Then, of course, again, no free lunch. Insert, update, delete operations will have an overhead. Because now, whenever you insert or you are changing a record, you need to do it in 2 different structures. The current one and the one being created, or the one that is paused, okay? And sort in TMTB is not supported. Maybe that is not an issue. You just need to keep in mind that it means that all the space that can be needed will be used within the context of the database, okay? Next one, max duration, also 2019, and is to be used with the resumable on. So you can say how much time you are willing to wait or to finish your operation. And if that operation cannot finish within the time that you set here, it will automatically pause, okay? So what you need to keep in mind, you need to remind to go back and say, let's double check if it really finished, or if it is still in post and I need to resume it, okay? Wait at low priority. So that is a little bit odd in terms of the documentation, because they say if it is an alter index, it exists since 2014. However, if it is a create index, it only appears nowadays on 2022. So this is an option that allows you to decide how the index operation can proceed when blocked by the schema modification lock, okay? So you can say what happens, and you can decide that by using the abort after wait. So what this does is waiting on a low priority lock to be able to do to start doing the index creation. And if you are like in a rush and you don't care who is running what, you can use, for instance, blockers, which will make the thing like I wait 2 minutes and then who else was blocking my creating a session will be killed and I will create. So be careful of that, of course, but keep in mind. So yeah, bottom line, check if it worked or was aborted, because if it was aborted, you won't have neither the creation of the index or it's not paused, okay? So in the end, what are the differences that we got? So this is the original script, and whenever they pause it and then start running again, but in this time with online on, but so the damage was done because the system continued for I don't know how many hours at peak until the index was able to finish to be created. So a lot of CPU, a lot of queries. At some point, I think also they turn off a couple of applications to try to make it faster. So the after, and this is a suggestion based on what we have been talking right now, would be keeping the same index name. In this case, let's assume that we had just product ID and now we have also the sub-product ID, and use drop existing on, meaning I'm not dropping first and creating after and creating the problem that we saw. And data compression page, because I did my SP estimate compression savings and I saw that I could gain like 50% space. So test that because sometimes it's a huge save that we have. Also online on, and max DOP4, resumable on, and I'm willing to wait 60 minutes, otherwise it will pause the creation of this index, okay? So things to be that you may want to also check is at the database configuration, the scoped configurations of the database. There is two new options, which is elevate online and elevate resumable. So you can set what happens if you try to run that, and that option is not supported because you are running a standard edition, for instance, okay? So you can say at the database level, hey, let's put it when supported, meaning that you can put the keywords on the index creation, but if it actually is not supported, it will not error, but will not use the online or the resumable thing, okay? And the other one that I said before, so the pause of the resume index abort duration in minutes appears also on the scoped configurations by default with 1 day. The maximum is 7 days. You do the math. 71,582 minutes. And if it is 0, it will never abort in that case. One other thing that I want to tell you to check the documentation, and is anyone already using turned on the accelerated database recovery? And yeah, for at home we have 1 person in the room that is using. So accelerated database recovery can be quite interesting also on these problems with transaction log becoming full, how much time you will be offline in case you hit that situation, because you can do instantaneous transaction rollbacks, meaning that you will not see probably on the error log like rollbacking 1%, estimated time 1 day. Thank you. And then also does or allows aggressive log truncation. Okay, so this is the way that you can turn it on. Please check documentation, check your use case, but I think it's important to, all together with the others, to have in mind. I would like to thank you again for coming. If you can leave some feedback, and I will be happy to take questions offline if you have some. Thank you.